So welcome to the Crew in Conversation. Thank you for joining us. Today we are talking about something extremely topical, which is the COVID-19 roller coaster in the hospitality industry right now. We're calling this, are we open, are we closed? And obviously we're right in the thick of that at the moment. It's a very tumultuous time. The new normal is anything but normal, with Melbourne back in severe lockdown at the moment and virus outbreaks directly linked to hospitality venues around New South Wales and Queensland. It's restricting how restaurants, bars and venues can open and operate around the country at the moment. It's not going away quickly, and we need to be ready to ride this wave of up and down. So how do venues and customers play this longer game in hospitality? How do you stay flexible to weather the storm, and what lessons can be taken from this pandemic and applied to business challenges in the future? We have three guests today on our panel who have extensive experience with this new normal already in different capacities, and they can really bring some amazing insights from first round lockdown, now into second round in Melbourne, and what's happening nationally. So first of all, welcome Justine Baker. Justine is CEO of Solitel Group, which is one of Australia's largest hospitality groups. They run multiple pubs as well as Chiswick Restaurant, Aria, North Bondi Fish, and many, many more. Justine herself is also a hospitality industry veteran. I hope you don't mind that word, Justine. She's worked front of house, venue management, and also now, of course, in executive roles as CEO. She's renowned for her strategic leadership and driving innovation through technology and product development. So welcome, Justine. We're very happy to have you.
Thanks, Janine.
Next, we have Wes Lambert, who is CEO of Restaurant and Catering Australia, which I think if you haven't seen Wes Lambert on your TV or heard him on the radio, I don't know where you've been. Wes, in his role as CEO, represents 47,000 hospitality businesses across Australia, not small. And Wes also has extensive hospitality experience, and I would say is also a veteran. His background includes investment banking, but then also across the board in hospitality. So from restaurant management and ownership in Australia, Asia, the United States. And Wes has really been a tireless voice in advocating for the industry during the pandemic, and also released his first book in direct response to helping the industry weather this storm and meet the challenges, called Saving Hospitality One Venue at a Time, the 7 pillars to pivoting your business through a crisis. And finally, we have Gary Burrows. Gary is country manager of global restaurant reservations platform, The Fork. And he's also very much a forward looker and futurist and corporate innovator. Gary's worked across several countries and markets, and is now obviously leading The Fork through a very challenging time. Before the pandemic, The Fork was focused on how it could support restaurants through their various challenges, which were not small, even pre-COVID. And obviously, the Fork itself is undergoing its own business challenges, but they've still been very much focused on where they can fit in helping the industry. He's also extremely well versed in what the data shows us, which I think is vital. So thank you, the three of you. Sally will start with questions, but as always, it's a conversation. So please jump in, and I'll be doing the same as we go. Over to you, Sal.
Thank you. Thanks, Janine, and thanks everyone for being here. I'll kick off right away with a question to Wes, the man in the middle of a lot of what's going on. Clearly, this pandemic is not going away quickly. We're stuck with it for a while. And I just wondered, in your opinion, how do we, both as consumers of hospitality businesses and people who run those businesses, how do we play both the medium term and the long term sort of game now, given we can't think short term?
Well, to start off with, it's super important that hospitality businesses are following the health guidelines. I know that there are differing opinions in the hospitality community of what should and shouldn't happen from a health perspective. But ultimately, once a law becomes a rule or a law, as an industry association, we're required to pass that on to our members and the industry. And we certainly will lobby for rules and laws that we think are strange or confusing or unfair. But ultimately, right now, the best way for us to deal with the health response in the medium term is to follow those guidelines, both from a consumer point of view, as well as a business point of view. And that allows us to continue to trade through the crisis. So really one of the things that all of the premiers have told me personally, as well as national cabinet members, is that if we follow the health responses more closely, that we would likely be able to suppress the outbreaks that happen. And we are seeing that in the states that have 0 cases, and we're also seeing that in the states that have clusters like New South Wales, but that are staying relatively low. And that's things like tracking and tracing. That's things like social distancing. It's not expensive things. It's the things that that are relatively low or no cost to the businesses. In certain jurisdictions, masks are now mandatory, and in others they are highly suggested. We're not suggesting that masks are the way to go, but certainly as soon as your jurisdiction does go into a mandatory wearing of masks, ultimately it's by following those guidelines. They increase consumer confidence and they increase business confidence when everyone is doing things the same way and the right way. From a long-term point of view, we need to be making plans as if COVID is going to be a part of the hospitality landscape for a long time. I know that when the crisis hit back in, we'll say February, March, and the government said 6 months of pain, and we all really, really pushed hard for that to end within 60, 90 days. And the government did not want a sawtooth recovery. However, that is exactly squarely where we are, is in a sawtooth recovery on the east coast of Australia. And so we really need to be looking this as a long-term situation and re-engineering and pivoting our businesses in the hospitality sector with the expectation that revenues are going to remain down as state borders remain shut and international borders remain closed. And certain areas, I was in Cairns last week, and they told us that they have all but replaced their state-based and international-based tourism with local residents in the periods like July and August, where they would typically have been going more into season. They're doing a really good job in replacing that with locals who now also can't go anywhere. They're advertising more locally, they're focusing more locally, and it certainly isn't a full replacement, but by re-engineering their businesses for the labor demands, for the operating expense demands, they're certainly getting closer to break even and in some cases profitable. So it's really about, we have to accept that COVID-19 is here for a while, and that we are not going to get back to hundreds and hundreds of people in a venue, and thousands of people at close quarter events in the hospitality space.
Yeah. And can I ask you, bearing that in mind and bearing the fact that local markets are looking more to fill their seats, if you like, with locals, what do you think are the best and worst case scenarios that we can see if each state is able to work like that?
Well, that's a broad question. We'll look to the West Coast. We have a report from one of our partners, our card processing partners, that Western Australia is now just 1% in revenue under last year on average. Northern Territory and Tasmania are also heading in a reasonable direction. Obviously, those states, they took the view of an eradication strategy, which for those states worked, with hard closed borders and very few, if any, exceptions. And so, those particular states are definitely advertising well to their local population that it's, staying local and eating local, and realizing that we need those customers to continue to do the things that they would normally have done, let's say on vacation, both domestically and overseas. And if you're going to eat out. It was part of the dining culture pre-COVID. It needs to stay part of the dining culture during the COVID crisis and in recovery. On the East Coast, it's a little bit more complicated. Obviously, in Victoria, we've spoken to our delivery partners as well as the entire delivery market, and they're gearing up to actually become very busy, especially between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. Because you will not be able to go to a restaurant physically, and obviously no one's going to rock up to a restaurant at 7:52 hoping to get served and get back home by the 8 p.m. curfew. So they're realizing that they're going to be the only game in town, both self-delivery and app delivery, after 8 p.m. So ramping up drivers and getting their systems ready to do that. And from a restaurateur point of view, they're also embracing the fact that certain times of day will become much busier. So they expect that now that many people will not be at work, that they will certainly get very, very busy and have to work on their social distancing in the morning, in the 2 or 3 hours that are considered to be the time that people would go out and get their breakfast and their coffee and do their daily shop. Also, a bit at lunch. There'll be a very defined time period because so many people will be working from home. And then they're really expecting rushes in that 6 to 7:30, 7:45 time range, when people realize that they haven't actually gone out for their groceries or their food yet. And so there'll be some very defined times in certain greater Melbourne restaurants where it's very, very busy. But they'll have to plan for that from a staffing point of view. So I think there'll be a lot of split shifts and certainly a lot of change in the way your business operates. New South Wales, we're hearing from our members that because of the comments from the government to be very vigilant and to certainly avoid certain business types and wear masks when you don't feel comfortable. They're telling us that their bookings are down. And as this is the beginning of the second wave in New South Wales and hopefully can be contained, we do expect that for the next few weekends that it may stay that way. Queensland is recovering nicely again. It's season there. It's it's warmer compared to the rest of the country, and I think there was a 9,000 person event in Brisbane over the weekend, and they're certainly not getting completely back to business as usual, but certainly headed that direction.
Yeah, thank you. Justine, it might be rather sort of useful to bring you in here. Obviously, you're at the coalface of what's happening with a whole lot of venues with Solotel. And one of the things that we know is that in the hospitality business, things change. Things have always changed, and it's as sort of sure as death and taxes, there will be change. How have you at Solotel as a group dealt with that and the hospitality industry in New South Wales as a whole, do you think? And how are you dealing with that upheaval of change, which is the new normal?
I think, as Wes said, when we went into it, I think we all had a mindset that we'd be able to come out. And I think we've really shifted our view on what out means. Out's a journey. Yeah. And we just got to make sure that every dip we have is higher than the last dip, and we'll keep going. But look, I think as a business, as an industry, we're very used to change. It's an ever-changing business, but this change is fundamental. That's the real shift that we're seeing, is that you got to reinvent your business models, your labour models, things that you may have done that you've seen as quite normal for the last 20 years, just add no value, and we've just got to shift and change. With that, I think, comes a lot of opportunities, but you've really got to change your mindset to look for the opportunities, because it's quite overwhelming. the everyday, I guess, conversations of hospitality, it's not a positive space at the moment. So we're trying really hard to make sure that we're seeing the wins in the small things, and also really driving that positivity through our team. And I think for them, especially at coalface of customer nervousness, which I think is definitely happening at the moment. And, you know, we're saying to our teams, you know, we're rebuilding a business, but if you read the media, we're on the verge of being shut down again. So it's how much you kind of really drive that, I guess, that vision and that goal of positivity, and that we're always going to keep growing the business rather than just listening to all the media that will kind of freak you out every day and make you not go to work. But I think there's a part of exciting part of reimagining, but you got to bring your team with you, and it's actually really exhausting. I think one of the things that we've really seen through this change is that evolution is great and continual change is really exciting, but when your change is so fundamental all the time, you never become the master of it, and your level of satisfaction at work also changes. So this kind of intrinsic, extrinsic kind of motivations to come to work has really also been an upheaval for a lot of our team. So I think it's about continual driving of messaging, and also for me, really staying positive and working out not just how we're going to survive in this time, but actually how you thrive. We're saying that this may be our landscape for the next 2 years, and then after 2 years, it's going to be something completely different. We've got to work out how to actually really succeed in this, because the restrictions aren't going away. Social distancing is a thing. The hygiene protocols are a thing. They're not going away. We've just got to work within it, and most especially make our guests really comfortable to knowing that we as an industry are so well versed in hygiene and regulatory environments. We can operate really successfully in this, and that we are safe. But that's a continual messaging. You just got to keep communicating it, and communicate it more, and communicate it again.
And Justine,
and you obviously
Wes mentioned before that venues with hundreds of people, you know, are going to find it hard to operate for now. Obviously that does affect you guys. You have some really large venues, you know, places like the beautiful Opera Bar. How do you plan for those venues? Because I know that you guys initially hibernated, but then felt like it really was better to be open. What do you feel with those larger scale venues? How would you sort of see those through the next couple of years?
Opera Bar is a great example of where you've just got to pivot everything. Even though I use the word pivot, I forget, so don't use that word.
You're allowed to.
Do now.
We just had to shift our business model. We had a significant portion of our revenue 12 months a year as international tourists, obviously with performance really changing with the Opera House. And it's such an iconic also corporate place too. So there's these three really large streams of revenue that just aren't there. So we're really imagining how Opera Bar can be Sydney-siders, you know, favourite venue. But one thing that we do, I think, the part with social distancing and large venues, you do have an advantage because you really can space your guests out, and also having an outdoor large space, I believe in spring and summer will really give us the leverage. And, you know, over in some of our businesses don't have any outdoor space. So it's a hard change. But when you look at overseas and the media that I've read a lot from overseas and the summer they've just had, is that overseas, the outdoor venues do have a distinct advantage. Yeah. But we are looking at everything we do differently at Opera Bar, and the whole business model, and especially labour model in that business, just it needs to change. So part of that is also exciting because you get to rebirth a business again.
I don't have to touch on that quickly, and it's not just because Justine's on the call, but from the day that I joined the business, Rob, who heads up sort of digital and marketing over at Solitel Group, he engaged with me, and we spend a lot of time together pre-COVID and post-COVID. And Rob, for me, is always sitting and he's trying to figure out the data, and he's always asking me questions about the consumer and the customer and how to engage with it, and how the consumer is changing the way that they engage with restaurants. So I think that's key too, is restaurants really, it's not just about front of house. It's not just about the food that you're delivering or the great experience that you give to consumers, but how you engage with consumers, get them to understand your COVID safe plans, how you enticing them back into the restaurants and making them feel safe about coming in. So I think that's something that Solitel does really well, and the team around there is they're looking at what is the customer doing and how do we make sure that we're engaging with the customer on that level. Even
in this last 5 weeks, we've seen such a behavioural shift in our bookings and the turning over of tables. What we're now seeing is that the dwell time in our businesses is far shorter than it was. It's half the time than it was 3 weeks ago. So going back to Gary's point on data, if we don't have data that's almost live, you can't react to those. And, you know, some of our businesses are turning tables every 45 minutes now. So when you try to imagine that 6 months ago, you'd think, oh God, what a stupid business model. Because you can't maximize your spends. But this is the way you got to do it. So and back to that kind of change of our people, their environment has changed, their role has changed, their responsibility has changed. And guess what? Next week, their role changes, their responsibility changes. And our guests are changing that quickly. They're changing not only how they're behaving in our venue, but also that kind of more macro trends on how safe they feel or who they want to go out with and who they choose to spend time with, and what they choose to spend money on when they go out is shifting so quickly. It's quite incredible.
Absolutely. And I think too, we've seen a big shift in bookings between 5 and 7 p.m., which has been quite interesting. Pre-COVID was always 6 to 8, and we've seen that 5 to 7. I think that a lot of that has to do with the work from home, because you're not traveling from your workplace, you're not working in the office, so you're engaging earlier and you're going in earlier. So we've seen a massive increase around that. And then obviously lunches. I think if you look at the work from home, people can have longer lunches. They used to, popping in and out, making it really quick in the CBD. Now they're meeting friends and colleagues and going for a 2-hour lunch. So I think that's an opportunity for the restaurant industry too, to really look at how do we deliver that lunch experience to the consumer.
And additionally, it's also the value of hospitality real estate, for example. So, every lease or every freehold, was purchased or leased on a particular business model. Certain amount of time in the restaurant, a certain amount of revenue, a certain size needed for a certain amount of customers. I was on a call earlier today, and the entire real estate industry is going to be turned on its head because hospitality is not what it was 4 months ago. And it's not likely going to return to that. It takes about 66 days for a consumer's habits to change. We're well past that. So things like 2-hour lunches, working from home, your delivery versus bums on seats, 45 minutes turn time on a table. These are things that you never could have even dreamed of would be happening in terms of customer habits. Well, once those habits become permanent, they're going to stay that way in some sense. So certainly the larger venues, and as Justine said, getting city-siders excited about the Opera House and the Opera Bar being their local, that's certainly going to affect many of the larger locations and some of the smallest locations that will find themselves jammed with lines of customers. So it's certainly this goes beyond the business model of the business in the venue. It's the venue itself that's certainly going to change.
Gary, can I ask a question? Just how you, as a sort of a conduit between the customer and the venue to help them sort of book, how do you think technology can sort of support these changes?
Yeah, sure. I think the love of our app prior to COVID was driven through convenience. So consumers are looking for convenience. You pop up in the app, you discover the restaurant, you place the booking, it's confirmed, it's simple, you can do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's driven out of necessity now, because as a consumer, you want to follow the government guidelines. So you want to help with track and trace, you want to be giving your contact details. B, you're really wanting to find the limited availability. So Unfortunately, I think a bit of that spontaneity has been taken away from the consumer. You can't just walk down the high street or go into the city and go find your restaurant, because the seats will be taken because of restrictions. And then C, a big part for us has been giving consumers the confidence to go and dine in a COVID-safe restaurant. We've worked closely with the RCA. We've taken that information. We allow our restaurants to inform us of their COVID-safe plan, and then we badge that on our various channels. And we're currently seeing a 2.4% increase in bookings for restaurants that have a COVID-safe badge versus the ones that don't. So for me, it really is, it's how do you give that consumer the confidence to go and engage with your venue through those channels. And then again, for me, tech at any point of time is about the data. And I love venues and restaurants speaking to us and going, what are consumers doing? What are their choices? What are the various demographics? And how can we tailor our experience to make sure that we're engaging with them in the correct platform? So for us, it's about engaging, giving them the confidence, and then using the data to just increase those bookings, because our aim at the end of the day is to get bums in seats and make sure that they feel safe when they're in that seat.
Being part of a global organisation, you've got evidence and experience from other markets around the world. And I just wonder what you and your international colleagues have kind of learnt about the pandemic and about the sort of customer behaviour in response to that, about the suppression, the recovery, the survival, if you like, and how it sort of compares to how we've been behaving in Australia. Absolutely.
So, over the last few months, we're in 22 countries. We've been running various surveys through those countries to find out. One of the key questions, and I'll read some of the data out, one of the key questions was, what was the frequency of visit post-COVID? So would you go the same amount or more? And we had 3 cohorts. So we had the enthusiasts, we had the moderates, and we had the reluctants. I have to say that Australia peaked across all the various. So Australians were definitely in the enthusiasts. Countries like Australia, Germany, Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, and Australia were all confident that they'd be going back the same amount of times, and if not more. We had the moderates, slightly above average, so France, the UK, Brazil, and Switzerland. And then the reluctants, who were fearful of going back to restaurants and weren't going to go the same amount of times, countries like Spain, Portugal, Argentina, and Italy. And I think if you look at those countries, those are the ones we were really hit hard in the beginning. And those diners felt that. Globally, more than 50% of diners were super keen to get back into restaurants the first month that they would be opening. So they really were, they were willing to get back in there. The biggest reason why not was obviously they were waiting to understand what restaurants were going to do to implement COVID-safe plans and to ensure their safety. And then an interesting one was the spending. So we still find that over 70% of global diners weren't going to watch their budget when going back into the restaurants. 70% were willing to spend the same or more when they get back into restaurants because they'd missed it that much. So that was interesting from the global perspective. And then some of the key things from a post-COVID data trend on a local level. Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays are still the most popular times to create bookings. We found more bookings are actually being created on a Sunday, and Monday's taken the worst dip at the minute. What we have found is traditionally bookings are created between 4 and 6. Now, a big percentage is being created between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. So the consumer is making the decision about where they're going to dine earlier in the day. So it's how do you engage with them during that period of time. Like I said earlier, meals are happening earlier. And then, look, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for the industry in Victoria. But when the first announcement was made with regards to the lockdown, on the 7th of July, 87% of bookings made were for the 7th and the 8th of July. So Victorians, once they were informed, they were very excited and to get back into get into the restaurant before lockdown happened. So those are some of the key insights that we've got. And again, Australians have shown, and all the data points that they love dining in and they will support the restaurant industry as soon as they can.
A question to Justine. One of the things that I know you're conscious of is diversification and what that means to the hospitality industry and you as a group. Mm-hmm. How important is that to survival at this point?
I think it's crucial. I think most especially where we've seen our businesses where we've got, it's about diversification of your customer base. So when we have a really diverse business, i.e. 7 days a week, busy with different segments all through, we've been able to ride this, since COVID really well. Our businesses that were very reliant on one segment, i.e. corporate spend, are finding it a lot harder and that, goes back to CBDs and the rise of suburban venues. So what we're really seeing is that whichever venue it was that was reliant and it had too much reliance on one customer segmentation has been struggling. So for us, diversifying that across the week and across the times of the day has been more crucial than anything else. The other part of that is also we've seen a real shift in the mix of sales. And because our late night trade isn't there anymore, people are, some of our venues that used to be really busy late at night are quiet by 10 p.m. So later at night, we had a higher profit margin. It was really incremental, it was a time of incremental revenue. That's really disappeared. So GPs in the businesses have shifted, sales mix has shifted, times of day has shifted, very much like Gary's saying, suddenly we've got these businesses that never had lunch trade, really busy at lunch, but it's really dipping off by 8 o'clock at night. So it is around really looking at, do you have a new market or is it same market, different day? Back to data, we really got to look at those insights. And, I think hospitality has always been run a lot on gut. And now's the time to really balance the gut with the insights and make sure you're going back to the data set and marketing. It's far more segmented marketing that is needed now than really broad brush brand marketing, so to speak. You've really got to know who your customer is, on what type, and really, really target them. So for us, we've been really working hard on, I guess, a couple of things with our customers, making sure they're safe, number one. And we've seen that safety is a kind of like core foundation. We were saying that compliance used to be our core foundation of our business. But actually that safety has now come into that compliance box, that you can't operate unless you know how to operate within this environment. At some point, you may as well just shut your doors. It's not going to work. So getting that fundamental right, and then starting to build on who our customers are at different times of the day and the week has been really, I guess, our focus. And working through how to replace the revenue. The corporate spend has disappeared. I imagine there's a lot of corporate cards that just have a big zero sum on them at the moment. That used to be worked out very heavily in our businesses. Where does that spend go? Where do those people engage? How do they then, if they're not going to the office, how do they engage with their team? Can we still be part of that? How do we furnish our rooms differently to make sure that we can cater for those smaller groups in a really safe way? So looking very differently, and we believe a lot of that corporate spend will end up coming back into our suburban venues. So just that seeing of maybe the CBD venues is just not where they want to be either. But then the CBD becomes a destination for the suburban people to go out again. So there's been this real shift in our consumer base. And like Wes was talking about the habits, it is around, all those habits have gone. And we've just got to make sure people make new habits with us.
I imagine as well that a lot of spontaneity has gone. And I think that kind of plays into to what Gary was saying too. In terms of bookings, you potentially are going to have a lot more data than ever, because there's going to be, everyone's making bookings, everyone's planning. There's not this sort of jumping around behavior. It's going to be quite measurable.
I think for our industry, the real challenge is how to retain the joy. Because people come out to connect, to have fun, to engage. How do we deliver the joy in people's life and still be a fabric, in part of their lives? But you have to do that sitting down, and you got to do this, and your time of window with booking window is different. So it's back to like really core. We keep talking about it's almost back to core fundamental of hospitality, and that incredibly hosted, guided experience that you've really got to focus on your guest at that time, because you don't know when they're going to be back and you don't know how long they're going to be in your venue. So it is, but retaining the joy. If your staff aren't happy at work, then your guests can't be happy. I think that spontaneity it's a hard one, because a lot of those magic moments happen spontaneously. They're not planned.
Yeah.
They do. And Gary, I just wonder, it's something that I know that you're conscious of too, that there is this bleed from the CBD to more to suburban places, and there's going to have to be quite an effort to bring them back. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And like Justine said, I think CBD now becomes the destination area, right? So the work from home policy has changed. People are still they're wary of public transport, so they don't want to travel into the city or into precincts within the CBD. You want to be able to walk local, experience local, and have that experience. So venues are going to have to find ways to really up the experience, and then use campaigns and entice customers back into it, right? You've got to give them that incentive to go and get back into those restaurants. I have no doubt that venues can do that. There's incredible venues in the CBD. They were the hubs. You went there during lunch hours, you went there after work. It was that ability to have that spontaneity. So I agree 100% with Justine. It's going to be, again, how do we entice them back in there through the various channels that we have, and then giving them that hosted experience. You might not have that natural buzz and environment and that ambience with lots of people, but you can still create that through an incredible one-on-one experience. And I think that's going to be key. So yeah, it's something that all businesses are going to have to look at. I think everyone has to look at it, right? And like Justine said, it's changing so quickly. So you might be planning ahead for this, and suddenly, let's be honest, if there is a very safe vaccine that is widely available in Australia, does that change everything once again? So for business, it is tough. I think a challenge for me was really focusing on my team and the staff and getting them to understand all the changes that were happening, so that they could give the support to the industry that the industry's needed.
And one thing that's happening. Go ahead.
No, Wes, please.
Well, and one thing that's happening that some of our members are telling us is the supply and demand. So as Janine said, where it's you have to make a booking to get a table or get a seat, and now the numbers of people on a table or the number of the cap in a venue. Some of our members, and it's becoming more than some, are telling us that the average prices are going up. That it's more bespoke menus, it's more price fixed menus. That the businesses are realizing that, as Justine said, that they only have 45 minutes, or they have a very an hour and a half, and they're not. They're trying to direct their limited supply of seats with a minimum spend. And we're seeing this happening more and more and more. And certainly the delivery is on average much more expensive than dine-in. Businesses are now allowed to add to the cost of the delivered items to cover some of the commissions, as well as the delivery fees. So the diners are not necessarily complaining about having to pay a bit more to continue to enjoy dining. As Gary said, there may need to be some incentives that happen to get people into the CBD areas, and hopefully the local councils will make parking free or less expensive, and certainly provide shuttles to more iconic areas on a more regular basis from areas where there's more parking, to avoid that too much public transport. But really that it's going to be a partnership between local councils in the CBDs as well as the businesses to align it all, so that we'll get people from each state coming back to those CBDs where the majority of restaurants are located and where almost all of the large venues are located.
And Wes, I wanted to ask a question regarding the extension and recalibration of the government subsidies, i.e. JobKeeper 2.0, for the industry. What happens when the subsidies stop?
What happened, or what is going to happen?
What is going to happen? I'm asking you to sort of hold up your crystal ball.
Well, I spoke to the treasurer face-to-face on Monday night, and he is adamant that there will be a relook at the eligibility for JobKeeper 2.0. And one of the main concerns was the June and September quarter, both eligible, both down 30%. Many restaurateurs and many of our card partners are telling us the same information. Really pushed and pivoted and pushed and pivoted. And for the June quarter, they were 27% down from 2019. And that was terrible for them. But then they found out, oh, wait, I'm not eligible for JobKeeper 2.0. And it's July, it's mid-July. And now I know already. I already know that I'm not going to be eligible 9 months from now. That destroys business confidence, and it certainly doesn't give them any hope for the future. So the Treasurer has listened to us and many other industry associations that have submitted to him directly and spoken to him directly. The amount will likely not change. However, the eligibility will, not to be quoted or quote him, but certainly may just be that September quarter. There is no discussions about changing who is eligible, either from the date of employment or the status, the visa status. And I know that's disappointing, but ultimately, it's the government's not going to backflip on things that were not in JobKeeper 1.0. It's that is the policy, and that's the policy that it's been. If hospitality businesses are just eligible from 30 September, many or most would continue JobKeeper from 1 October to 30 March. And as far as the landlord code of practice, we're in direct discussions with government to tie that to JobKeeper 2.0 also, which then would restart the negotiation process, because most tenants had negotiated only for a few months until they reopened. Well, here we are reclosing and re-restricting many businesses. That certainly will put many mom and pop landlords to the wall. And so we're working on with the government on a fund, hopefully that landlords can potentially dip into if they lose those commercial rents due to the up and down of the restrictions. As far as payroll tax and BAS top-ups, look, the payroll tax is a state-based, and they're all considering abolishing payroll tax altogether. And the BAS top-ups is the ATO, and certainly continues discussions. Two things that all industry associations are pushing very hard for, that will certainly bring people back to the CBDs, Gary, is the deductibility of business meals, and that would be a permanent change, and the FBT for 1 or 2 years to go away, which would encourage certainly more robust spending. And also some changes to GST being added to bills in hospitality instead of included. We're pushing very hard for that. That would be an instantaneous 10% jump in our industry, as well as some minor changes to capital gains tax. As Justine said, many businesses that can't or won't pivot into post-COVID, the new way of doing business, and they might want to sell their business to pay off the personal debt that they have accrued through COVID-19. If they had a low basis, they'd have to pay capital gains on anything that they earned by selling that business, which certainly is not the situation you want to be in when you can't even settle all of your debts in trying to get out of your business and do the right thing. The last thing is insolvencies. There is talk that the insolvency protections will continue post 28 September. Otherwise, we're going to see a huge spike in insolvencies, administrations, and liquidations in October.
Yeah, and there's an expectation that we will see some sort of consolidation of the industry. And I mean, unfortunately, that's just the reality. But Justine, it might be a good question for you. What do you think we sort of stand to lose if the industry does sort of contract a bit and consolidate?
I think we lose the young, the risk takers, the creatives who enter our industry that end up being the future leaders. And I think what that also leads to, I think there'll be a huge displacement of hospitality staff in general. where people may choose to retrain and go to a more stable industry. You know, we always used to think that hospitality was recession proof. We never thought about pandemic proof. And I feel there's going to be a big displacement. I also worry about people choosing hospitality as a career. Well, at this stage, if you're 19, 20 and passionate about it, I'm sure your parents are actively telling you that it's not a great choice right now. I hope, though, with consolidation also comes the opportunities for those young people. Maybe not, maybe some of the bigger guys like us can back some of the young creatives and still keep them in the business. Because I think as a industry, it's a fairly complex business model to run. And a lot of those, young people coming into the industry just don't have the business experience to run the business. They've got all the ideas and creativity and passion, but it's actually the business experience that's going to get you through the hard years, the dry years, and get you into success. So maybe through the consolidation, there'll be an opportunity as well where the big and the small can come together and make sure there isn't a creativity drain in our industry. I think that would be incredibly sad. And I do believe...
Are you seeing people leave? Are you seeing...
We have.
I wonder, because you've obviously got a great snapshot with such a large workforce.
We've seen displacement out of Sydney in general. So a lot of people who work in hospitality aren't from Sydney. In Sydney, they come from lots of different areas, not only globally, but domestically. A lot of people have gone home because they can't afford to pay their rent, or they feel that job security isn't there. And even if they came back part-time, they still can't pay their rent. So JobKeeper is not enough for them to pay their rent and live. So we've seen displacement back to other states or rural areas. We've seen people just tap out of hospitality and have used the COVID time to actually retrain and start afresh. And then there's been others that have just said, no, that this is it. I can't think about doing anything else in my life. I love it. I'm in, and how do we get through? So yeah, I think there'll be a big shift in who comes into hospitality in the next 5 years, definitely.
Well, and certainly with the international borders remaining shut into the foreseeable future, there are many vets that teach the hospitality courses, the cooking courses, that are extremely worried that there will be little to no international students coming in to take those courses, and that the government needs to push very hard and advertise a lot to year 10 and year 11 students, because ultimately the universities cannot handle the influx of graduating Australian students in total. There will be lots and lots of people who will not be able to start uni programs just because there's no places. So we certainly need to be lobbying. We are, and we ask all of you to lobby, all of the education providers in the government to make it as easy as possible to get students into the hospitality programs, because for the next few years we won't be able to rely on those visa, those temporary skilled migrants, the working holiday makers. As things do begin to recover, it will be up to Australians. It'll be up to those those young people and those innovative people to drive that growth forward, because without labor, you cannot rebuild our industry.
It's such an important part, isn't it? If we could go back to that old mentality of training and bringing people up through the industry, it is the most incredible industry, even if you choose to go to university when you're 28, but spend that fundamental kind of young years learning how to work in a team. You serve every walk of life. You learn to respect and be part of every walk of life. And I think it's one of the most rewarding industries in terms of you make lifelong friends and you learn a lot of skills. And even if that turns you into an engineer later in life, it's a wonderful foundation. And I'd love it if the government went back to that sense of respect of hospitality as a great trade.
Conscription into hospitality.
Let's go.
Illusion.
A lot more fun than the army.
Things have happened, right?
Say again?
Stranger things have happened.
Wes, can I ask a question? And it might be one of our final questions, actually. But you, in your book that you've sort of quickly written to sort of cope with some of the questions that were coming out of this very uncertain time, it's full of lots of very sort of sage and clever and informed advice about how to run a hospitality business and how to change what you're doing when you need to. If you were sharing just one tip from your book for now, for people who are working in hospitality right now, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one, but it's got to be the first pillar. You have to find a mentor, right? You need to find someone, whether it's in your industry or outside of your industry, someone to ask, someone to bounce ideas off of. Ultimately, a lot of entrepreneurs will, they'll get very laser focused and they'll get very in their business, and they'll be working in their business and they won't see the walls collapsing around them. They won't see this crisis coming towards a particular neighborhood or a particular state. They won't see where they could pivot, or there are many people that can be stubborn and don't want to pivot into other areas. So it's really a good idea to find a mentor or multiple trusted mentors that may be in a similar or even different industry that can give you some guidance and that you can game plan with, and you can spitball ideas off of, just to ensure that you're not foregoing good ideas, or you're not throwing the best ideas, the baby out with the bathwater. I think that is the most important thing to do to start to pivot in a crisis, is to listen to other people that have been through many other crises. There have certainly been some world-changing events that have happened over the past 20 or 30 years, and I'm sure that the five of us have been affected by one or all of those world-changing events, and we know how to pivot, and we know how to guide others to pivot, and it's just very important that we share that information, and that the advice for hospitality professionals that want to pivot, ask everyone they can until they get a good trusted mentor.
Fantastic. Janine, do you want to ask your final question?
Yeah, we on all of these panels we ask the panelists the same question, which we find has some interesting responses, which is basically that throughout the pandemic, I think whether you've been flat out or a little bit quieter than normal, I think everyone here has probably fallen more into the flat out camp than the baking sourdough camp. But it's certainly given everyone a time for reflection, and particularly about the industry that we all work within, being hospitality. If there was one thing that you would like to see change on the other side of this, that you may have been reticent to say in the past, but I think this has given us the opportunity to all be a lot more honest and thoughtful about these things, what would it be? Gary, maybe starting with you.
I think potentially what Justine said earlier is, I think a lot of times hospitality has been driven on gut, and I think it's time to really start looking at the data and to finding that balance. It can't all be about how passionate you are about the industry. You have to start running your venue as a business. And that means you have to look at all the platforms. You got to look at how you manage that as an actual business. So I think the data is there. It's not just the fork, it's everywhere. Consumers are willing to give you that data so that they can experience your offering. Use that data to make really good business decisions.
Yeah, great point. Wes?
Oh, I think that, business owners, as Gary said, they have to get out of bad habits. It is, Justine said, you are starting over with a brand new business. You are starting over with a brand new business. In Melbourne, especially right now, if your business is locked down and you close and you stay closed for 6 weeks to 3 months, you are reopening as a new business with new customers and new menus, and potentially, if you fit it out during the lockdowns, potentially new fit out. You're a new business, and I'd said this, I've said this many times. In World War II, all planes started off as propeller. And 3 years later, almost all planes were jet engines. And so in a very, very short period of time, businesses in the hospitality industry need to become jet engines. And you know what? We all love propeller planes. They're nice to look at and nostalgic, but really fast, you had better become a jet engine, or no one will want to fly in your business. So it is important that you embrace the change, and don't be afraid of it. There are certainly lots of companies like The Fork and many others that can help you through those type of pivots and changes. And just go with it. You're in hospitality because you love hospitality, and hospitality will not change in your heart, and it won't change in the hearts of your consumers. Your delivery may just change a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, hospitality is going nowhere really overall. People will always love dining out, drinking out. So just have to evolve the model, right? And Justine, how about you?
I think it's really about this is forced flexibility in people, and for people who have been inflexible because they've had a choice to be inflexible in mindset. I think this has really forced great change in people, and I think that's a really great moment for our business, all of our businesses in the industry, because I think we've got to get to a bit more of a generalist mindset again, that if you walk into one shift and you're front of house, then guess what? You may end up in back of house by the end of the shift. So we've got to get back into a generalist mindset, and whether that is in a head office role or in a venue role, I think it's a broader mindset of flexibility in roles and responsibilities, very much back to that kind of can-do approach. And we've seen our staff just rise to that, and they've loved it, and we've been throwing everything at everyone, and they just picked it up and they're going. And I think there's a real buzz about it, but we've got to make sure we've got to look after our people in all of this. And a lot of mental health is the dark side of what's going on, not just in our industry, but a lot of anxiety around people's future. And I think that if we can come out of this even as a more caring industry than we went in, I think that would be a really good space.
Great. You've all been great leaders in this time in your respective areas in hospitality, and I think the industry is lucky to have all three of you. So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being part of our conversation today. I think there's some fascinating insights, and I will share this with as many people as we can, because I hope that they get to hear what you've had to say. And so thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Janine.
so much, guys, and good luck.
Gary.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye.